Hello everyone and welcome to round 6 of the Legends and Prodigies tournament 2025. Faustino Oro versus Alan Pichot, both of them originally from Argentina. Alan now represents Spain. I think he switched maybe 2022, 2023, probably due to financial reasons. And Faustino doing incredibly well. He's on 4.5 out of 5 last round. He couldn't get the full point, and that means he is 1.5 point away from winning his first Grandmaster norm. But the opponent in front of him is an incredibly strong one. Alan was at one point over 2650. He dropped a little bit in the last 2 years. Also, one of the reasons probably why he switched the federations. But obviously this is a very, very strong opponent for Faustino. So let's check it out. It's quite an interesting game and quite an interesting opening. Faustino with white opens with pawn to e4. We have pawn to e5 and knight to f3. Also, both of them are on 4.5 out of 5, so 4 wins and 1 draw. Knight to c6, we have knight to c3, and knight to f6. Sorry about that. We have the 4 knights game. Bishop to b5, sort of the Spanish variation of the 4 knights, and now bishop to b4. This is the double Spanish variation, or the double Ruy Lopez, if you will. We have castles, castles, everything symmetrical, and finally bishop captures on c6, breaking the symmetry. D captures, and now pawn to d3. If you remember in the what's called the Esports Cup, Magnus played knight captures on e5 in both games against Hikaru Nakamura. But here we have pawn to d3. This is the main line, and this is by far the most common move. Knight to d7 and knight to e2, preparing to chase away the bishop and then remaneuver the knight over to the king side. We have rook e8, and now knight g3 is most popular here. Sometimes they go pawn to h3 first, but here we have pawn to a4 by Faustino, and it is now as of move 9 that we have a completely new game. Okay, we have knight to f8, knight to d2, now going for c4, and then to e3, and then maybe to f5 via this route. We have knight to g6 and knight to c4. Let me just, as it could be relevant to this game, let me just quickly allow the clock times. I didn't have it for the previous game, so I forgot to turn them on here. Apologies for that. Let me just, yeah, there we go. All right. Sorry about that. All right. There we go. So knight c4, like I said, shifting the knight over to e3, we have bishop to e6 and pawn to b3. Not worried about messing up the pawn structure because, well, it's not really good for black. You give up the bishop pair, you have lost control over d5, you give white the semi-open b file, so this is great for white. So instead, after b3, just continuing development, queen d7, we have king to h1 and pawn to b5. We have knight back to e3. Bishop to c5 and now bishop to b2, and here Alan decides to play bishop captures on e3, which is a little bit odd. He does have the bishop pair, although the knight is strong, the bishop could potentially be very strong as well, and I guess he just didn't want this knight coming to f5. But okay, he maybe you could play f6, and then your position is fine. This bishop on b2 isn't really doing all that much. e5 has been strengthened. And then you figure out how you want to develop without settling for maybe less right away. But okay, bishop captures on e3. We have f captures pawn to a6 and queen to d2. Developing the queen, connecting the rooks. We have pawn to c5 and queen to c3. Faustino puts pressure on that c5 pawn, and Alan advances it to c4. We have b captures on c4, b captures, and now pawn to d4. While you can capture the pawn on c4, this would give you a double set of doubled pawns, which is not that great, and they can easily be picked off later. So it's not something that you would brag about to your friends. So after b captures on c4, we have pawn to d4, and now rook 8 to b8. And here, Alan sort of drops the ball a little bit, if you will. I don't know what would be the proper term, for dropping a ball in chess, but you should go for e captures on d4. And then after e captures, play this nasty bishop to d5 move. And the d4 pawn is attacked twice. And this is how you destroy white's strong central control. There's really not all that much white can do here. Because if you capture the bishop, then rook captures the knight. And if you play pawn to e5, then pawn to c5. Then you capture, then the e5 pawn becomes weak. And definitely, you know, the move you want to play. But okay, Alan played rook 8 to b8, and now Faustino very, very happily played pawn to d5, and now no more of such nasty tactics. We have bishop to g4 and knight to g1. And now it's not easy for Alan to find moves, and he's also below on time. We have queen to c8 and bishop to a3. Just finding the bishop a nicer diagonal, you know, improving the piece that wasn't doing all that much. That's always a nice way to look at a position. You know, when there's no when there's nothing to really solve, nothing to push, nothing to capture, then you know you find your least active piece and you put it on a more active square. So you know, sometimes it works wonders. We have pawn to c6, trying to break Faustino's strong center, and now rook 8 to b1. And again, Alan misses an opportunity to really punish Faustino's insolence. He should capture on b1. And then after captures, look at this, c captures, e captures, and now this beautiful bishop to f5 move. First time he missed bishop d5, now he missed probably this bishop f5 move, as it prevents white from pushing the pawn to e4. And now whatever white plays, let's say you even prepare it, you're just going to put a bishop on e4. And there's these pawns are weak. There's nothing you can do about it. If knight to f3, even queen comes to g4, now threatening captures, pawn to f5 is coming. This is a completely winning position for black. So after rook 8 to b1, he played bishop back to d7, and now Faustino is again back in the game. Rook captures on b8, queen captures, and now queen captures on c4, c captures on d5, and e captures on d5. Faustino undoubles his pawns. We have rook to c8 attacking the queen, and now you could defend the pawn, maybe something like queen d3 and then c4, e4. Faustino decides to trade the a pawn for the c pawn. So queen captures on a6, we have rook captures on c2, and rook to c1, immediately offering a rook trade. And again, Alan should play rook captures on c1. And after bishop captures, just create some breathing room for the black king. And now whatever you play, okay, maybe a little bit more pleasant to play with white. You do have two passed pawns, but it is an equal position. However, after rook to c1, Alan played rook to a2. He went after Faustino's bishop, and now his position is completely lost. But it's not easy to spot why. Feel free to pause the video and win the game for Faustino while I give you a couple of seconds. The move in question, believe it or not, is rook to b1. That is the key idea. And now there is no way to stop that rook from coming to the back rank. The queen is hanging, so you have to move the queen. And you can't really capture the rook, even though the rook is undefended. If you capture the rook on b1, look at this. Queen to a8 with check, and now there's no way to block check. Even if you go knight f8, the square is covered by the bishop. I know you missed that. You, as usual, forgot about our good friend the bishop, but that would be a very, very quick checkmate. So after rook to b1, we have queen to e8, now hoping to get the rook back into the defense. But here comes queen d6, now threatening rook to b8, which would end the game. We have rook to c2, hoping to get the rook back to c8 to help out with the defense on the back rank. But now Faustino finds the quickest way to victory, and that is bishop to c5, preventing the rook from going to c8. We have pawn to h5. Alan, as like I said, a very strong player, he will find resources, but Faustino is engine precise here. We have rook to b8. Bishop to c8, queen to c7, now attacking the bishop, and queen captures on a4. So Alan has to give up a piece here. We have queen captures on c8 with check, king to h7, and now it's still a little bit dangerous. There's a queen and a rook. You know, the knight isn't that excellently placed. You could easily go wrong, especially if this knight gets activated. You know, even white could get checkmated. However, Faustino continues again in the most precise manner, and that is queen to f5. Queen to g8 check is also fine, but queen f5 gets the job done just as nice. King to h6, and here Faustino played bishop to e7, and he was in this position on move 37 that Alan Pichot resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. It's a really, really fine move. Point being that the thread is a pretty simple one. Let's say you play something, whatever. You're just going to go queen to g5, or you can even sacrifice the rook. Rook h8 check, knight captures, and then bishop to g5 is checkmate. This is even cooler. But the real threat is, you know, if knight captures, then you just have a rook to h8 checkmate. So those are the two threats, and they are unparryable, if that is a word. So yeah, very nicely done by Faustino. It was you know, a very close game. Alan had that you know, he missed that bishop to d5 idea, and then the bishop f5 idea, then rook captures idea. But yeah, I mean, obviously you can't win if your opponent doesn't miss something, and those were the 3 misses that allowed Faustino to win this game. So Faustino climbs to 5.5 out of 6 with a rating performance of almost 2,900, and he is half a point away from winning his first Grandmaster norm. He needs 6 out of 9. He's already 5.5 out of 9, and he has 3 more opponents, 2 Grandmasters, 1 International Master, and you know, if he you know, brings only a trace of what we've seen so far in the tournament, no doubt we will see Faustino wielding his first Grandmaster norm. Whether he can win the other 2 and become the youngest Grandmaster ever, we'll see. But, you know, he's playing some interesting chess, and I'm very, very happy to cover these games and, you know, sort of create part of chess history here. That's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Sanjeev Sharma, Creators Workshop, William Rideout, Anthony Manucci, and Rokao for contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.